there are not many furry zoophiles compared to normal zoophiles. Now, let's go a little bit of a different angle here. We've got 303 million, if you remember. You can take the number from earlier, and that's the population of the USA. 400,000 is the assumed worldwide population of furry. Let's assume they all live in the USA again. That would only make 0.13% of the USA furry. Less than 1%. Almost a tenth of 1%. Now, scary thing is this is, you're assuming 1% is a zoophile, and the amount that are actually furry in the United States is 0.13%, which means you're 9 times more likely to know a zoophile than you are to even know a furry. Now, if you want to break that down to the furry zoophiles number, 0.026% of Americans are furry zoophiles, which means you're about 40 times more likely to know a normal zoophile than a furry zoophile. Yeah, and this is all, again, with sadistic numbers against furries. This is scary, folks. If the numbers were actually, just to reverse the biggest change here, let's say that the 10% number was actually accurate for normal people being zoophiles instead of 1%. That would make you 90 times more likely to know a zoophile instead of a furry, and 400 times more likely to know a zoophile than a furry zoophile. This is all scary. Very, very scary. Normal people, if there is a normal, should really be more worried about zoophiles instead of worried about furries. Furries can worry about zoophiles too. In fact, we have to be slightly more worried about zoophiles. But then again, all the normal people you bump into are more likely to be zoophiles because you bump into much, much more of them. Even a furry. Say a furry was split about 20% of the people they knew were furries, and about 80% of the people they knew were not furries. They would still know more normal zoophiles than they would furry zoophiles. Scary, people. And I guarantee you, even a furry knows more normal people than they know furries, unless they're like one of those die-hard in the fandom every minute furries. And that's a small percentage of furries. Now, again, keep in mind, I bias this against the fandom. I was mean to the fandom in this number crunching. I smacked the fandom around like a red-headed stepchild in this number crunching. I inflated the fandom's estimated numbers to the maximum that we have estimated. I increased the percentage of them living in the U.S. from 70% to the whole entire worldwide population. I increased the percentage of fandom actually being zoophiles from 17% to 20%, while at the same time decreasing the percentage of normal people, taking it downwards, from 10% to 1%. Even if you don't agree with 10% being zoophiles of normal people and go with the 1% number, I'm still being really sadistic against furries in this number crunching. And normal people, honestly, came out far worse on all this number crunching than furries probably ever will. So, wow. Just wow, man. I'm more or less speechless. I don't even know how to express this. And I've had, a couple comments on my profile lately where I posted all of this in text form in case you want to read it, telling me that, the furries should put more effort into saying, we're not zoophiles and parade against it and such and so forth. And after doing all of this, I'm wondering, why are you concerned about furries? Why aren't you more concerned about zoophiles? Because even the entire furry fandom with estimates as large as, like the maximum estimate is 400,000 people right about now. That's the entire furry fandom right there. Put that up against the assumed 1%, down from 10%, number of zoophiles in the United States. 3 million zoophiles in the United States alone versus 400,000 furries total, 80,000 furries being zoophiled if you go with 20% instead of 17%. We are pretty much not even a blip on the radar compared to that. And that is one concern out there. So honestly, people that think furry are a problem, people that think this and that, don't you have better things to go after here? You're going to be worried about zoophiles and say that we're bad about it and this and that. Why don't you go after the zoophiles themselves? Normal society seems to have a much bigger problem than furry society. Why? Because though we might have a slightly larger amount of zoophiles in the fandom than normal people have in normal society, you have a quite significantly larger amount of zoophiles total. You probably know many more zoophiles than you will ever know furries. Scary. So yeah, with this mind-numbing and scary revelation, I'm gonna say be scared, YouTube. I'm a furry. I'm supposed to be stranger and weirder and kinkier and what have you. And you know what? This scares me.